Hello everyone, my name is Malavika Rajkumar. I am the content lead of Nyaya. Today we're having our discussions as per the Nyaya Speak campaigns and let's just invite our guest for the evening. One second. Hi Jasmine.
Hello, can you see me?
Hi. Am I audible? Yeah, all good. Okay. So let me just introduce the woman speaker we have with us today. Her name is Jasmine George. She's a lawyer out of Bangalore and she runs a fantastic organization, Hidden Pocket Collective. They are an NGO that works on adolescent and reproductive rights. They also have a lot of services on their website. I've constantly seen all their posts where they share all latest news on sexual health, reproductive rights, and I'm really happy to have you on board. We are actually conducting these series to talk to different women in different spaces and professions to understand the concept of equality when it comes to access to services, or generally how people really make them feel, to put it down to simple terms. So, Jasmine, could you please tell us the work done by you and your organization?
Thank you so much, Malvika, for having us on this live. It's always nice to go back to lawyers and having these conversations because I feel like when we are talking about rights, it's always better to talk with lawyers. So basically, we are an NGO based out of Bangalore and we mostly focus on abortion and adolescent sexuality. And we have been running this organization for the last 4 years, trying to
Yeah.
create conversations around reproductive health. And when we talk about reproductive health, it's mostly from a care perspective. And we realized that these are not things that generally get spoken about. So we thought it'll be nice if it's our issue. Why don't we ourselves go create these conversations? So that was the hidden motive behind starting it. But the more we kept on doing it, we realized it's really a need for a lot of us. And post COVID, it became a reality. It was a huge reality check that maybe it's going to be a lot more difficult in the future. So that is definitely the. I mean, these are some of the small motives that keeps us going. But yeah, that's the bigger picture of why we are there and why this collective still continues its importance.
All right. And from your website, basically, could you tell our audience basically what kind of help you can actually get when you
Yeah.
come to the website?
So basically, we basically focus on sexual and reproductive health, and we actually take services of a platform which we had created, Hidden Pockets, and on that platform we have a lot of services. So what we're trying to do is create content, mostly information on sexual and reproductive health, inform people about legal rights, and at the same time we are trying to connect people to service providers in the cities. So that's the basic idea that if you are so once you've got your information, once you know where you can go collect your information, we help you to reach that space. So we do, I mean, the platform does counseling, the platform does legal counseling, the platform actually helps people to connect. So we are trying to create an ecosystem around reproductive care so that people feel like there's somebody who will help you with assisting services.
So you also have a WhatsApp service, right, in
Yeah.
multiple languages?
Yeah.
What are
Yes.
these languages?
Yeah, the yeah, I mean, so the platform has a care line. We run a care line number
Yeah.
on WhatsApp, and we have been trying to reach more and more people to provide abortion services. To It's a real time service, so if people ask for doubts, and we actually try a level best to provide solutions. But again, it's again a platform we have been using the service of, and the collective does the part of legal policy, pushing for
Hmm.
policy changes and pushing for more of thought provoking conversations, basically.
Understand. Especially relevant in terms of the MTP bill also that's coming up. This is quite a discussion in the lawyer community, at least.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Keeping this in mind, I know a lot of friends, especially, who have faced a lot of issues trying to access reproductive services, basically, from
Yeah.
their medicine stores in
Yeah.
Tamil Nadu, for example.
Oh,
Especially in Tamil Nadu, for example. But keeping that in mind, like, what are the barriers that unmarried women or single women actually face when it comes to such conversations, and are they institutional in nature?
so it's very simple. Our reproductive health care doesn't talk about single women. That's not the audience we talk about. Actually, it's not even a legal entity. And it's sad that, especially in the case of Tamil Nadu, because you mentioned it, Chennai it has people from all walks of life. Definitely, it's very reproductive health services. It's a huge challenge in the country, and it's because it's also it's a very beautifully, I would say, institutional problem, because be it the doctors,
Hmm.
be it the chemists, be it any of the service providers, they find it very difficult
Hmm.
to accept that single women are sexually active. So what, so it's not just the myth of single women not being sexually active, but the genuine belief that they should not be active. So definitely there's moral policing. So simple example of ECP
Hmm.
pills being banned, informal ban in Chennai. I mean, there is no legal ban around it, but if you look around, there is no ECP availability in Chennai, and that's something that the collective has been talking about for some time. That why is that people don't have access to contraceptives? It's this is 2020, and it's very sad that single women have to still assert their identities. Single women have to still say that we have a right. And I know there are a lot of organizations who are trying to fight even the case of how right to contraceptives should be right to life. It should be included in that. So it's sad at some level, because so we always say that a lot of us, especially some genders, our
Hmm.
identities cannot be fully lived if we are not given access to reproductive or sexual health services. And the gatekeepers, or these people who are stopping us from accessing, are the doctors, are the lawyers, are the courts, who always think like they are going to decide on behalf of us. So it's pretty bad, and that's something we have been trying to change, especially for single women. And I mean, the last census data says we have 73 million single women. That's a huge number of women who are denied their rights, basically denied their existence, you know. So, which I think so, it's high time. It really needs to be changed.
Even in terms of sensitization that you get in school, like adolescent sensitization, like
Yeah,
personally, I've never gone through this. I had to come to college and actually read like website like yours or
yeah.
other websites to actually find out. But yeah, this is a major issue. And uh, just to come to the point of the MTP amendment bill that the cabinet has recently approved. Now, from a legal perspective, at least, I know that when it's about 20 weeks,
Yeah.
and that's the upper limit currently under the law, women face a lot of issues when they go to court. Mainly
Yep.
because even if they go around the 17th or 16th week, courts take so much time, medical boards take so much time that justice is too delayed and they fall under the limit of the law.
Correct.
So, what do you think about the new MTP amendment, keeping in mind it's increasing its period also and including special categories for that matter?
So, as somebody who has been working in the reproductive health, I expected more from legal fraternity. I always do, because in my head, that's the only place where any change can actually happen. So, I was disappointed, and a lot of us are disappointed, because I still feel MTP Act, the Amendment Act specifically, is very protective in nature. So, it's still very doctor driven. It's not from a women's perspective. Again, so
Hmm.
even some of the clauses that have come in, and it's hugely debated, even within the reproductive health movement or abortion health movement, it's hugely debated whether these are the things that the civil society asked for. So we still
Hmm.
get this tokenistic things like, okay, we'll increase it to 24. Okay, we'll increase it, but you need to have a medical board. Okay, we increase it, but for special categories. And one of the biggest problem with the rule of exception is that you have to prove yourself why are you a rule of exception. So you have to show that you're a rape survivor. You have to show you're a disabled person. You have to show, you have to really fall into that exception, which if you look from a legal jurisprudence makes no sense, especially for a woman who's already struggling. Like in our work, something we have realized that be it 7 weeks or be it 18 weeks, it's equally horrible in this country because it's a money making business, abortion. It's as simple as that. Because and especially if you're unmarried, if you're not that married people don't have a problem, they have their own issues, but if you're a single person and who does not even have partners, I think so it'll be extremely tough for people to access. Because most of us, I mean, this is coming from a perspective of being a young woman who might need the services. Most of us don't even get to know we are pregnant, say by 7th week or 8th week, so we're already crossed the first trimester. And this is the problem where I keep saying that these laws are being drafted by people who are not menstruating. So they see it as a logical decision. They'll be like, oh, okay, 2 weeks is good enough. That doesn't how it works. And people don't realize that how much of emotional trauma people go through before making those decisions. So first you have to make your own emotional decisions. Then you have to jump your own guilt of accident, finally making that decision that okay, I'm not ready to become, or I don't want to have this pregnancy, or this is an unwanted pregnancy. And then after all that hurdles, you reach the service provider, and again, MTP makes it very doctor driven. So you need a doctor's approval. You cannot say it's not delivery based. It's not demand based. It's very much based on what the doctors decide for you. After that, then medical boards come in, courts come in, and we all know how these institutions work. They are not comfortable terminating. I am very, very saddened by this whole right to life movement that has started in Tamil Nadu. We already have people filing for petitions saying that embryo has a right to life. So we already have a parallel movement that is happening. So, I mean, women fought for all these years just saying that unwanted pregnancies or pregnancies that are not something that people would like to go ahead with should not come in place. So I am disappointed with MTP amendment, and I mean, it could have, I mean, again, I mean, even I think so there are a lot of petitions even right now pending where people have asked for maybe increase the first trimester, maybe increase the scope of medical abortion pills. Because, I mean, the MTP Act was made from a very different perspective. It was made from a population control perspective. Now things have changed. And with so much of technology around, I mean, I know this law is always 20 years behind when it comes to technology, but if your women, if your people are dying because of your bad decisions or because of medical boards or legal courts taking too much of time, I don't think so that's the way we should be going ahead. So definitely MTP, and also it's a simple rule of jurisprudence. Amendment is a chance to improve something. So if you're just doing a tokenistic approach, it's actually a lot of wastage of everybody's time, because policy making is expensive work in this country. So after all that lobbying, if what we wanted was not reflected in the public policy, it's disappointing. So again, it's coming from a very civil activist mode who has been pretty very emotionally involved in this, and could have been better. So yeah, I think so amendment could be 100 times better than the current version.
At least like the cases that we see, like Suchita Srivastava saying you have bodily autonomy, it sounds great on paper, but it's just a paper tiger at the end of the day. And especially I've noticed in the MTV bill that also came out, when it comes to crossing the 20-week limit, usually I've seen through the cases at least that medical boards usually say it's a result of a fetal abnormality, and that's never usually terminated. And the bill itself is providing a separate exception saying that it's not applicable in such cases. So all of this is a little problematic. If
I mean, if I have to really get into that, it has also a very eugenic. There is a whole debate of eugenics that is going around it, and some of the words that have been used, I mean, it's very problematic. Abortion movement already has enough I would say confrontations with disability movement, and they have been really trying to work on rooting it on maybe pro-choice, rooting it on women's bodily autonomy, but it's not that simple. So when you bring in words like eugenics and put it in a law, I don't think so movements and the collective, we are extremely movement driven. We are movement building people. So it makes no sense for us that we don't get rights on by trumping other movements. So yeah, it could have been better. Let my optimism come out. It could have been better.
Yeah. And especially regarding conversations that happen regarding sexual and reproductive health. Again, sadly, years later, it's still spoken in hush hush tones till a certain age, I would say. Like there is a certain movement that's coming about. But what do you suggest are like things that would normalize such talks? Because if women knew about effects of PCOD
Correct.
or uterine cysts, or even knew what they were, because sometimes even doctors don't have the patience to explain all this to you, you know?
Yeah.
So what do you think should have been done to normalize the conversation and move forward regarding this?
So at the collective, most of us are 95% are women, and we just have one male member. And something we have realized that is that our most of our the genders, only one gender's reality is reflected everywhere. Other genders don't, are they not there? So even when so this the point of you, what you mentioned, like doctors don't have patience. Doctors don't have patience because they don't think women have pain. Women are trained, most of us are brought up by mothers who have endured immense pain. So we complaining about little bit of periods pain is something it's unthinkable of. I mean, I still remember. I know enough stories where women get shamed for going for cesarean because they didn't go for natural birth. Women get shamed for asking for painkillers during extremely painful periods. So I think so. Clearly, we are not part of the realities. Our issues are still not the mainstream issues. But also, I think so. This idea of pain is little romanticized with regard to a certain bodies. So certain bodies can take pain. If you take pain, you become more important. We can make a martyr out of you. Whereas, so that's why this whole issue of women trying to have bodily autonomy, women wanting to have sex, women wanting to have abortion, women wanting to talk about pleasure is something complete no because you don't see women from that perspective. She can either be a mother or a sister, something that needs to be protected or something that needs to be martyred.
These
It's
traditional
something.
roles. Yeah.
She's either a goddess or a doormat. There's nothing in between. So that's the cynic in me talking. But so I think so. It's very sad in some way, and but it's really changing because a lot of people. I always thank feminism for this. People have fought for this. A lot of people have said this. Enough is enough. And also, I think so. It's not sustainable. This patriarchy is not sustainable. I think the patriarchy itself knows it. This is not going to last forever. We are in a disaster because of it. So clearly, things are changing, but institutions have not changed, and that's the biggest problem. So even if people change, individuals change, the institutions in which we are located, that
Yeah.
hasn't changed. I feel like most of the institutions around are still patriarchal or still very much focused. I mean, they're still there to actually make the life of a certain gender more comfortable. So we are still assisting that infrastructure. So which is a huge problem, but things are changing. A lot of us are saying that I would like to have a world which speaks of my reality. So there are things happening, but as long as we don't challenge those infrastructures that we have, that has actually been made up of our labor or our ancestors' labors, it will take a long time.
Yeah. And speaking of change, I think this was a welcome news to many women to see the period leave policy by Zomato,
Yeah.
where they gave not only women but trans women also. So recognition of identities was also a great thing that they actually did. This started a big movement. Obviously, there were a lot of angry Twitter people and tweeting about how this is unfair. But I personally feel that this just makes the office more inclusive. But what are your thoughts on this, basically?
So this is something we have also debated in our office, and I mean we do have a policy already. So it's because we are all women. So I mean one of the first policies was the realities of our body needs to be reflected. So we have to keep speaking about period pain, cramps. So it became office lingo to that extent. So because I've heard people being extremely uncomfortable about people sharing their period stories. So it was part of our office lingo, but we don't have a period leave. We actually don't. But what we have also worked on is like a lot of us, especially during lockdown, had extremely difficult stress issues, mental health issues. So we function from a what is well-being perspective, and I mean, maybe it's a personal view that I don't think so. People have to say that they need, because of period and they are in pain and they need a leave. I think so. As somebody who's been running organizations with people of similar experiences, lived experiences, I understand when somebody says I won't be able to function today, and it can be any reason. So it's maybe we are taking the period leave little more further, because why just period? It can be, some of us live with PCOS, some of us live with uranus tract infection, some of us live with I mean, there are a lot of infections, and a lot of disease, and a lot of well-being issues. So we haven't really, so that's another issue we have been focusing on. But I do think we are already a feminist collective, so our understanding is very different. But I feel like, yes, in a space like Zomato, in a space like where most of the time women are trying to become men, maybe it's a great start to even start saying period leave. I mean, it's a great conversation starter. So start saying the word periods, that, oh, okay, my colleagues here are on periods and they're still running, and they are feeling this pain which is unbearable. So I would really say it's a great start, and corporate definitely setups need to work on it, because yeah, they don't actually realize how painful it is. So yeah, I think that's a good start.
I understand. So there's this, keeping in mind the feminist movement, Gloria Steinem had this wonderful article on what men would do, what would happen if men menstruated. And she concluded that it would turn out to be a worthy masculine approach, that people would end up worshipping them, versus women who actually go through it and have to suffer, like you mentioned. So where do you think we need to concentrate efforts? Like what can we do?
So I actually like Gloria Stan for I think so, her sarcasm, and also the genuineness. Which she also made a statement like, if women went through abortions, there would be clinics in every 1 kilometer. It'd be like McDonald's. It'd be everywhere. And I think so. What she's trying to say is, like I mentioned some time back, our identities, our realities are not reflected. We are not there, and it has really, like, I believe this. Other institutions around are really built on our suffering, on our sacrifices, on our, and it really has made patriarchy very strong, because there has not been enough resistance. But again, this is a very personal view. I feel like, and I believe in this, and what Audre Lorde had mentioned, that it's difficult to destroy the master's house using their own tools. So I mean, it's again something feminist. I mean, some people are hopeful, optimists that we can create a better world. We can change this world, this existing world, by. But I feel like most of us are products of this world, and whether we like it or not, we have hangovers. We have colonial hangover, we have patriarchal hangovers. We are really drowning in hangovers. So I feel like it's tough. What I would say is, we have to start separately. We have to create our own versions. It's a lot of work. It's definitely a lot of work. I always say that long-term solutions are public educations, investing in public health system, investing in public information system. It needs to be invested. I also feel like state, going back to the socialist understanding of state being responsible for creating infrastructure for citizen. I understand with the coming of technology, the relationship between state and citizens have changed. But with this movement of a lot of movements for that matter. I mean, I always look towards Dalit movement, especially women in the Dalit movement, who have. I mean, there's nothing more to say. These people have really changed the narratives. They have struggled. They have fought. There's enough stories, and they themselves have said there's enough. It's done. It's over. There's nothing that we need to work together. They will create things of their own. So challenging is great, but I think so we still speak the same language. We speak the language of the master. And I mean, we still, even to win, they say, right, if you have to win chess, you have to play the game by the rules of chess, and I don't know chess. I'm never going to win that game. So better way is, I take away all the labor and just go out. But again, it's a long term vision. It's a gender neutral education required. Okay. Venkatesh, I would genuinely say for some time, I want to say our stories for some time and then I'll go for gender neutral. But I feel like all the identities need to be recognized for some time because, like, we can say trans women, trans men. Like,
Yeah.
we were on a call with our interns, and I remember asking people. So they were all like, yeah, we should have trans inclusive policies. They kept on saying the right words. And when I asked them, do you have friends who are trans people? There was
Hmm.
silence. Or do you know, like, have you ever hanged out? Something
Hmm.
more than just rights discourse or just throwing words around. And they were like, no. And I think that's why we have to change. We have to keep saying these stories until it becomes some kind of reality. But it's a long term work, and I would say, especially during lockdown, don't give up hope or patience because it's easy and it's very tiring. It's a very tiring work. But yeah, we some of us were very lucky to reap the benefits of our ancestors. So I feel like we owe it to our next generation. But yeah, I mean, I am a blind optimist, so I'll go with it. But let the cynics decide. I mean, what the way they would like to take. But yeah.
That's what I definitely like. Community uh, conversation and information. I think for me personally, that's always been the first step. Like if I ever felt that I was thinking of something in a wrong manner, or even slightly doubted it for that matter, I
Correct.
always like at least social media has provided me an avenue to triple check or quadruple check.
Correct.
So that's always a great initiative, and especially having you today has been particularly great because many of our users on Instagram, at least, come to our page to understand the law, but law is not standalone. I mean, as a lawyer, I definitely want to put that fact that you have to always see a perspective, you have to see many perspectives to an issue, especially something as delicate as abortion or
Yeah.
sexual rights or sexuality for that matter.
But I love
So,
the Nyaya makes law very simple, and because that's one of my biggest problem with law, that it's
yeah.
deliberately made very complicated. So I really appreciate the fact that there's an effort being made to make it simple so that more people can access it. So definitely that's kudos.
Thank you. That's really sweet.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I guess let's wrap up our conversation. It's been really great, Jasmine. Thank you so much for taking out time. I mean, I understand that both our professions require us to go on a lot of webinars and a lot of online events, but really, thank you. This has been very comprehensive, and we'll be sharing it across our platform also.
Thank you so
So,
much. Good talking to you.
all right. Bye.
Bye bye.